There's a saying in Yorkshire which goes, "There's nowt as queer as folk," which means that people are strange. There's nothing as strange as people. It's not really anything to do with sexual orientation or gender or anything like that. Therefore, it's just saying that people are really strange. So on the one hand, we might go about our business in the day and everything seems very normal. Everything seems much as it should do. The human world seems right and proper, but it isn't. That's just because we've accepted it as being the way to do things. It isn't. There's nothing right and proper about it at all. It's totally bizarre, but we can't see that bizarreness. So one very pertinent quirk that we human beings have, and it's a quirk that has often been talked about in various ways, is the quirk of preferring to live in a world which is rationally understandable in a straightforward way, and within which it is possible for us to practice this thing called purposeful behaviour, which clearly we're very keen to be able to practice. Now, that may not sound too queer, but the thing about it is we'd rather live in a world which is rationally understandable and within which it is possible to conduct purposeful behaviour, even if that world is actually completely untrue, rather than the alternative would be to live in a world which isn't untrue, but within which we can't practice our purposeful behaviour in any meaningful sort of way, and which is not amenable to rational understanding. So faced with those two possibilities, we unfailingly opt to live in an unreal world that we can understand, and not just understand, but enjoy this sense of agency, which is the sense that comes out of purposeful behaviour. Because if I can purposefully do stuff, that's empowering for me. It's empowering for my sense of myself as a agent, a volitional being. And not just this, but an agent or volitional being who's very much in charge. And I feel myself to be very much in charge, because I can get things to happen that I want to happen. I can have my own way. I can be a successful controller. I can be a successful controller within a world which I am able to totally understand. So there's another one-upmanship there. There's another empowering feeling that comes about being able to completely understand the world that we live in, as well as being able to control effectively within that world. So I'm kind of making a bit of a meal of that, but it is kind of a weird thing, really. It's weird because we don't think about it in that way. When we do think about it, it's very peculiar indeed. Extremely peculiar. So Amit Goswami uses, just trying to illustrate that other people have said the same thing before, and I'm not totally off my head. Not that I can really prove that, but I can try. Amit Goswami uses a joke to explain this, a kind of a fairly well-known joke, and he's probably not the only one to have used this joke in that way. But the joke is about a guy driving along late at night, in the dark, and he sees someone by a street lamp searching the ground, walking back and forth, searching. So being civic-minded and helpful and all the rest of it, he stops his car, gets out and comes over and talks to the person and says, "You've obviously lost something, can I help you?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I've lost my car keys." And so he helps him look for a while, but they're not getting anywhere. So then he says, "Well, where exactly did you lose them?" And the guy says, "Oh, over there somewhere," pointing into the pitch inky darkness down the road. So of course our man says, "Well," he scratches his head and said, what in the hell are you looking for it here for? Why are you looking for your keys here if you lost them all the way down there? And the man says, "You see, the light's better here." So that's the joke. And the meaning that Amit Goswami is kind of getting at with this is that it's a metaphor, because the light is the rational mind. The rational mind has its own type of light, kind of an artificial light, but it has its own type of light. And the car keys, we could say we're looking for car keys. We're really trying to work out, understand things, psychology in particular. We're trying to evolve an understanding of psychology. And so we're doing it standing under the street lamp. In other words, we're doing it using the rational mind, and I'm making too much of a meal about this as well. So that's what we're all doing. Of course it's what we're all doing. No one's even going to disagree with that, of course. If you weren't sure on this point, all you have to do is go and find a number of journals on psychology or whatever, social psychology, experimental psychology, whatever. Spend a couple of weeks reading through them. Now, the one thing that you will notice is that they're very, very rational, and there's nothing irrational in it at all. It's kind of a point of honor, really. You can't be writing irrational stuff in a international journal of psychology. So the problem is that we're never going to find out anything at all. We're looking in the wrong place, totally. But the good thing is we can waffle on and say things and accumulate a kind of a structure of sorts of knowledge, but none of it's real, none of it's relevant at all, none of it's helpful or useful or anything at all. But there is a positive side to it, because we do have this empowerment factor of living in a world that we can understand, and we can say, yes, what it means to be a human being, that's a rational thing, and we can understand it. And that makes us feel good. That gives us a sense of security. Now, of course, it is ironic that we as psychologists should fool ourselves in this way, because we as psychologists obviously should know all about what it means to do something out of an insecurity, to do things in order to make ourselves feel secure. And to have that as a hidden motivation, we ought to understand that when we do something to try and build up a sense of ontological security, what we're doing isn't what we say it is. That's only just the cover story. What we're doing is only just to make us feel secure. So the discipline of psychology on the overt level exists to enlighten us and teach us stuff about the mind, what it means to be a human being. But that's not really true. We won't say it, but that's not really true. What it's really for is to give us a sense of security about things, give us a nice warm feeling. And that's a very, very normal human thing to do. It's true for so many things. If I have a relationship with someone then the overt story is that I want to be with you because I love you, because you're the light of my life, because because. Whereas it could be the case that the real agenda is that I'm looking for security. I'm afraid of being on my own. I don't want to have to live life on my own. I don't want people to say something weird about that guy because he isn't in a relationship, or there's something weird about that woman because she's... In other words, there's other reasons which we won't touch on. That's not a particularly good example, but there's loads of them. And I could spend half an hour talking about them, but I won't, because there's no point in doing that. But say religion. We could say that I sign up with some religion, whatever it is, for an honest reason, because I want to have a relationship with the divine, God, or with Jesus, or whatever. That ain't true, though. You can rest assured that ain't true. I'm looking for security. I'm looking for someone to tell me what it's all about, and then what I have to do. And if you tell me that, I'll be so glad. But I can't admit that to myself, obviously. Now, human beings have been doing this as long as we've been human beings. In other words, what we have been doing is opting for a world that is understandable to us, reassuringly understandable. Worlds with which we can operate in such a way that we know what we're doing is a good thing to do, or the right thing to whatever, because of the good feeling it gives us. If we didn't have that, we'd have this thing that Kierkegaard called angst. It's like, oh my God, what's it all about? What am I supposed to be doing? And that intense feeling of not knowing and perplexity, and there aren't any answers. Angst isn't something you use as a motivation to find the right answer. Angst is always there. There's no end to angst. There's no answer to angst. If you find an answer to angst, then what your answer is really just self-deception. So that's the human situation. We opt for self-deception rather than honest angst, as the existential philosophers have said, and as the existential therapists have also said. Not that we have a hell of a lot of time for existentialism. It's a word, we can bandy it around, but we don't have any time for it. So the key thing is that because of our unacknowledged need for security, a sense that we know everything about the world that we're in, and we know who we are, and we know what we're supposed to be doing, we actually do something. We actually self-sabotage ourselves. That turns into an act of self-harming, because we're having to limit ourselves so much. We're having to truncate ourselves so much, imprison ourselves so much, in order to have what we want, which is the ontological security. And this is very obviously true, because if I settle for a world that is completely understandable and logical and all the rest of it, and everything can be explained, that can all be explained, you know. If I opt for that world, which is an unreal world, then I really have shot myself in the foot. I really have constrained and limited myself, because to be constrained to an unreal world without knowing it's an unreal world is a pretty severe impediment. There's no way that we can kind of look at this. We could wander around scratching our heads, thinking about it in different ways, thinking, looking for some kind of thing about it which isn't an impediment, but there isn't. There's absolutely nothing good about this situation at all, apart from the fact that it gives us a spurious feeling of well-being, which is very precarious and which we will lose eventually anyway. But we can't really count that as a benefit, because it's not a benefit, obviously, not when you actually reflect on it. So, the first thing to consider, if you want to get real about things, is that, if you want to get real about psychology, is to say that it is predicated upon our individual psychologies, are predicated upon self-deception, and that this is across the board. It's just not that. It's not just that there's a few people that go into this weird kind of withdrawn state of retreating to a private world because they're so frightened that they'd rather do that than meet reality. That's not like that. We all do it. Every single. How can you even meet someone who isn't in that situation? We're all busy doing the thing. We're all busy being whatever it is we're supposed to be. And all of that is untrue. So, moving on from there, we can infer that this situation whereby we have sabotaged ourselves, played a nasty trick on ourselves, done something really not at all good to ourselves, and we can infer that that is going to have knock-on psychological consequences which will manifest themselves in the form of suffering, mental suffering. And so that helps us a lot to see that, because we can lay the suffering at the door of something. We can say the suffering is there because of my insistence on living in this unreal world where everything is known to me, and I can walk around within this unreal world feeling kind of cocky and sure of myself and confident and strutting around like, because I know it all. It doesn't necessarily mean I've got delusions of grandeur that I know absolutely everything, but I know the way of it, the hang of it. I know how things go. I know enough. I just know all the main things about it. And that's enough to give me this sense of confidence, ego confidence, which is so very highly prized in our culture. That's where it comes from. So where does our ego confidence come from? It comes from our stupidity. We have cultivated this stupidity assiduously, carefully. We've put a lot of work into it. And out of this fine stupidity that we have cultivated for ourselves comes ego confidence. It's like the ad, which is probably an awfully old ad now, so maybe most people haven't seen it, but it's like a Colgate ad, where all of a sudden you get Colgate confidence, and there's this kind of little ring, that Colgate ring that appears that goes bing, and you're super Colgate confident. Why? Because your teeth are white. That really says a lot about us, doesn't it? That this supreme quality that we all want, this type of confidence to go out in the world and be who we are, or who we want to be or think we are, all because our teeth are white. It doesn't say much about our confidence, really, does it? It doesn't come down to much. There's not a lot of depth in it. But still, that's how it goes, really. And it's not just the Colgate ad. For a long time, people have said, oh yes, if you correct little things like this, so you look a bit more normal, for God's sake, then you'll feel confident, because there's confidence and looking normal. As we all know, you wouldn't want to look like a freak, or basically you wouldn't want to look like you're not looking like every single other person. Then you can be confident. Yeah, I'm not weird. No, nothing weird about me. I'm not weird. I'm not odd. I'm not an individual, really. But we don't say that, because we say we are an individual, and we try and prove that by putting together whatever kind of lifestyle elements or interests or whatever the hell it is that we can buy off the shelf, that we can prove that we're an individual. We've got our own taste, our own style. So what gives us this ring of confidence is living in a world which isn't an enigma to us. which is non-enigmatic, which makes perfect sense, and there's nothing ever going to happen in it which is really going to be too weird. That's where ego confidence comes from. Living in a world that we can understand, that's not going to spring any surprises on us, and being efficacious within this world, being able to get to happen what we want to happen, which basically means we can win at the game, whatever game it is we're playing. And then there's this supreme moment of euphoria. It's like cocaine, snorting a big load of high-grade cocaine. It's like, whoa, yeah, I can get things to happen what I want to happen. I can fulfill my goals. And the fact is that really that's an illusion, because I don't have any efficaciousness. I don't have any efficaciousness because I'm being unconsciously manipulated by mechanical rules the whole time, so that goes out of the window. And also, we could also point out that whatever it is I think I want and say I want and believe I want is a meaningless and unreal thing anyway, so the whole thing really couldn't be more hollow. And yet that's what we base everything on, totally. But it's really, really good to see this. It's kind of like the Buddha coming around, checking out what's going on. The thing that he said is that the Buddha I think he would have explained what he's doing in terms of a doctor that just comes along, looks at the symptoms, diagnoses the illness, and then says, yeah, you want to take some of this. That'll clear that up. So the illness is our addiction to illusions, our addiction to living in a crappy world that we can always understand, even though it's not a real world, because of our fear of actually living in a world that's too big for us, that we can't understand. And so once we understand that, the cure, so to speak, is totally clear. Couldn't be more obvious.